It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays, and I've spilled something on my pants. Oops, go me. I think it's a bit of coffee. Anyway, this topic came from a Leanna Cares client. And he asked me to do a video on how to know if you're a loser. And that's a tough one, right? Because that's a social judgment. So, watch on if you're curious. This is going to be an interesting experiment. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. There are 6 people right now receiving subsidized Leanna Care sessions. So all support helps. To me, a loser is not somebody who has a setback. Obviously, everybody has a setback. And just because somebody calls you a loser doesn't mean you are one. To me, a loser is someone who doesn't learn from their mistakes. And so they just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. They blame other people. They make a big stink. They thrash around, but they really don't stop, take stock, and say, how can I get a better outcome next time? And the biggest marker of a loser to me is people who blame others instead of owning their shit. And people who seize on technicalities to distract instead of just having an honorable conversation, right? You know I'm big on honor in 2023. I had this encounter, shall we say, over the weekend with this guy on Twitter who really thought, at one point I said, really thought he's a wit. He's half right. Apologies to Mary Jess. That's his line. Though it's an old line, right? But this guy thought it was real clever to deliberately condescend. He admitted to condescension. I'm not making this up. Like, he flat out said, yes, I condescended. And he deliberately came at me in a condescending way, then claimed I was angry, and defensive, and that proved I was in need of professional help. And first of all, there's no shame in needing professional help. Anybody who's weaponizing that to try to control or get their way, that's abusive. But there's a shining example of the natural consequence of being condescending, deliberately condescending to someone, is you're likely going to piss them off. Now, I saw this guy coming and thought he was pretty pathetic and, yes, a loser. So he didn't piss me off, but he was adamant that I was angry because his ego was in it, right? That's why he started condescending in the first place. And if you're wondering what the fight was about, it was about the word inappropriate. Yeah, not something that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, this guy really thought he had me. And I posted some of the things he said. A lot of it was Abuse Markers 101. And this was clearly something that had been done to this guy instead of, done to this guy, and therefore it worked on him. Therefore, he decided to do it to other people. That's how the cycle of abuse works, right? You can tell what was done to somebody by the abusive ways they treat other people, because that's how they learned it, right? But this guy happened to have, false accusations of sexual assault ruin men's lives in his Twitter bio. And it's like, oh, fucking shit. Like, that's all we need. A giant loser like that going around flying that banner. Because there are a lot of guys that flock to that banner because it's a great way to hide when nothing's your fault. Because you feel like everything's your fault. But that is a rare but serious issue. and deserves effective advocacy by people who know how to be persuasive and productive. So I was just like, ah. But yeah, that to me, a guy who deliberately does something shitty, thinking it makes him big, and people were laughing at him. He made an ass out of himself. He picked the wrong person to pick on there. That's a loser to me. Not because he was awkward, not because he made some mistakes. It's because he actually had negative intent there. And he thought, the ends justified the means there, and he didn't get the ends. He hasn't learned. And that's different than people who make well-meaning mistakes. That's different from people who have a shitty start in life and, need more help. A loser to me is somebody who keeps selling out their principles, selling their soul, selling out their honor, and just ends up getting further and further and further behind instead of standing on their own, going, no, it doesn't matter what other people do to me. I'm going to behave in a way I can defend. So at the end of the day, whether it goes well or not, I know I didn't take the low road. I know I treated the other person with respect. Now, that does not mean being nice to somebody. Sometimes the most respectful thing to do is to call somebody on their bullshit. But it does mean not deliberately condescending and then, doing things like this to me. And allow me to explain before you react, please. A big loser marker is when, because it was, I said something about telling somebody they've done something inappropriate. And he freaked out about the word inappropriate. Actually said that he stopped talking to people because they used the word inappropriate. It's like, well, that's an overreaction. That's not an appropriate reaction. But I said to him, there was a way to say that without rejecting the entire message. Say you don't like the word inappropriate, but you understand the rest of the mess, and he just wouldn't do it. He wasn't the word inappropriate. It's wrong. It's not. He has a sharp tongue. This, that. The next thing I said, okay, you're being an asshole. How's that? And he accused me of name calling. That is a loser move. Because that is an example of his communications. That was me trying to give him what he wanted. Okay, you don't like the euphemism. I can understand that because I know that inappropriate is really vague and is misused by overuse a lot of the time. Okay, you have a sharp tongue. You want blunter speech. Okay, you're being an asshole. That's name calling. Oh, you fucking loser. He steered the conversation that way and didn't like where it landed. And I see that again and again and again and again. It's dishonorable behavior. And it doesn't make people respect you. Somebody who's a loser doesn't have the respect of the people around him. No matter how much money he has, no matter how much, power he has, people just don't respect, probably because he inherited the money or she inherited the money. There are a lot more men like this. Women who are losers tend to be a different breed. That's more, that we all know that person who claims to have been mistreated by men over and over and over and over again, but she keeps going for the same kind of assholes. And eventually people just get tired of the sob stories because she's not owning her choices. That's an example of a woman who's a loser. And I try to balance these examples because I just don't have as many female friends. So, and the ones I have tend to be atypical. So my examples tend to be more masculinized, but I'm trying to watch that because I've seen from a lot of the, mental health literature that we're working with and trying to rework, a lot of it's very feminized language. And so it bounces off men. And so I try to watch both. There's an example of me taking something that I could sit back and make excuses and go, well, that's what the book says, right? Instead of listening to feedback and going, okay, yeah, we can do better here. And we can go up one rung at a time and actually make some progress. That's accountable behavior. That's how you earn the respect of other people, because even if they don't agree with you, somebody who understands respect recognizes that the person is trying, and that the person, and not the fake trying of, I'm going to say I'm trying but then make a lot of excuses to do nothing different. There's a lot of that around. But somebody who is actually applying corrections they have received, and instead of making the same mistakes over and over again, they're making new mistakes. Those are people that productive people want to be around and want to work with, because they understand respect, they behave with honor, and they are accountable. And that does not mean they let people blame them for things that they don't feel are their fault. It's just when they recognize they could have done something better, they own it and they don't make excuses. The biggest mark of a loser is somebody who makes excuses that everybody listening to them, that isn't biased to just identify with the loser. Anybody with half a brain sees it. You can see right through it. It's an excuse, not a reason. The person's embarrassing themselves and they just don't have the internal strength to go, yeah, I messed that one up. Or I didn't know, but I see how I can do better. Blaming everyone around you is not the path to success. Sometimes it is somebody else's fault. Sometimes people legitimately do bad things. But you should be able to specifically identify what the problem is there and why it's a problem. And is it reasonable to be criticizing somebody for this? And that's one of those things that people who have good judgment because they have healthy self-esteem, that's what separates them from people who have unhealthy self-esteem, and so they're going to stay stuck. The loser thing, people who are stuck. A person who has their shit together isn't conflict avoidant, but they don't seek out unnecessary conflicts. They can be tough when they need to be, but they're not unnecessarily aggressive. They're doing the bare minimum or a moderate amount to assert their boundaries, not to try to just unsuccessfully bully someone into submission. And that's really the core of loserdom, is losers at the end of the day are unsuccessful bullies. They blame everybody for their shit. They try to throw their weight around unsuccessfully. They manipulate, they condescend, they triangulate, but it doesn't work. And so at the end of the day, not only did they not get the thing they thought they were going to get through the bad behavior, but they lost the respect, if they had any to begin with, of everybody around them who's worth a damn. And the thing about that, the reason that makes these people losers, is that when it comes down to it and they need other people, no one in their right mind is going to stick their neck out for somebody who has stabbed them in the back. If somebody isn't coming at you from the front, straight on, nobody's going to take a risk for that person because it's a bad risk. And so that is literally being a loser. Because when the chips are down, rightly, nobody wants to support you if you've behaved in a way that is dishonorable and untrustworthy in the past. So being a loser isn't about your successes. It isn't about popularity. It isn't about how many people consider you a friend. It's, do you have the respect of the people who do know you? It could just be two people, or it could be hundreds of people. And it doesn't mean nobody dislikes you. Every successful person has people who utterly hate them, and in some cases want them dead. There are people who want me dead, you know. But do the people who know you respect you? Or are you in a group where everybody just tolerates each other because they don't want to be alone, they don't want to lose friends? You know the answer to that. You can think of people. I remember a couple people I was talking to a friend of mine about that we were like, why did we ever talk to those guys? They were losers. And it was because a ton of people tolerated them, but most people were laughing at them or saying nasty things about them behind their back with cause, not just because they were nasty. And this all is very subjective, yes, but there is a gut thing. If you think about it, do people respect me? If you can think of a few, awesome. If you can't, you might want to make some changes. Okay, Real Talk Wellness Wednesday. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. I do not endorse the term loser. By the way, I don't use it. This was somebody in a Leanna Care session asking me what it is. So take it that way you will. Thanks for watching and be well.